Hello everybody. Today I wanted to talk about the top 10 things that I would recommend that everybody know before they get into ball pythons. First, I wanted to call out and mention that we are vending our first show this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, at the Valparaiso Armory. That is the Midwest Expo show, or the Valparaiso Reptile Extravaganza. If you are local, I think it would be really cool if you came by, see what we got going on, just to see the show, just to see local shows in general. I think it's really important to support local shows. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with our list. The number one thing, and the thing you're gonna see on pretty much anyone's list, is do your research. Research many different sources, research many different thoughts, ideas, and ways of doing things, and research everything, including everything we're gonna say on this list today. Not everybody's way works for everyone, so find what works for you and do it. And don't be afraid to try new things. But it's important that you source out veterans' thoughts, a lot of stuff that Canova or Justin Kabelka has out there. There's a lot of stuff from World Constrictors, Olympus Reptiles, Chris Hardwick. These are a lot of people I watched myself. I watched a lot of it. I actually really started looking into things by Clint's Reptiles, which is mostly just a rating system, but he talks about how they need care and everything like that too, and how easy it is and how hard it is and all sorts of stuff. But do your research. This goes for anything. Any pet. Don't just buy an animal and bring it home and go, oh, what do I need? Getting into the second thing, it would be your enclosure size. It's okay to start with a small enclosure. A lot of people will start with a cheap 10-gallon tank. As long as you are totally understanding that that is not going to be its enclosure for too long. It's okay for a while, but make sure you understand what you're getting into and that you have a plan in place to size up that enclosure. On top of that, you might not even want to go tank. Some people will literally go buy a tub from Walmart and just put their snake in there. That's actually okay, so long as you do the right thing. You need latching lids, and even then, it depends on the size of the snake and how strong they are, but I would go with this, like the 4 latches at the very least. Just make sure that you have a plan in place for the size of your snake. You're gonna get a snake that could be under 100 grams when you first get it if it's a hatchling. In fact, it most likely will be. This snake is going to reach, if it's a male, about 3 to 4 feet, and a female about 4-ish. 5-ish feet, but they can reach up to 6 feet. There's lots of reports of them even getting bigger, so you should prepare for that. It should at least be able to stretch out its body if it wants to, at least in a L-type shape. In regards to your tank too, you're gonna make sure that you don't go too big. Some people will just say, hey, I'm just gonna buy the tank that they need as an adult. And you can do that, but you need to make sure that you're smart about it. Put a lot of places for them to hide in there. Make sure that they have an adequate water bowl in there. Mainly hides. That's what you need. If it's too big, they're not gonna feel secure. And that's the whole point. They need to be able to feel secure. So you can go as small or really as big as you want. Just make it decently sized, adequate. And if it is too big, make sure you have a lot of hides in there. Number 3 would be temperature, humidity, and equipment. Might sound like a couple things for there, but I kind of consider them all the same because the equipment manages all that. Snakes do not generate their own body heat. They're ectothermic. They need to get heat from an external source. So in the wild, that would be the sun. In captivity, that is going to most likely be a overhead light bulb or an under tank heater. So like heat tape or a heat mat of some sort. Either way will work, but think about it this way too. What if they want to go into their warm side hide? It's going to be partially blocked off by an overhead heater. An under tank heater will be able to warm their belly a bit better. So that's my personal recommendation. When you look at other people's research as well and what their recommendations are, you're mostly going to find that they recommend an under tank heater as well, and it's what all rack systems use too, to my knowledge. These need to be regulated by a thermostat. That is probably the most important thing. If you had to choose between no heat or heating without a thermostat, go no heat, as long as it's temporary and you're going to fix it. If you have these things off, it can reach crazy amount of temperatures. I've had thermostats kind of go haywire a little bit and the probe come off a bit, and they've reached into the 120s once, and the snake thankfully wasn't on it, but I've heard even like into the 200s, and not only is that going to kill your snake and cook them quite literally, but for God's sakes, it's a fire hazard, a massive one at that. It is important that you get a thermostat of some sort. You can probably look into them and you say, oh my God, these are starting at about $100, but that's not true. You can get really nice branded ones in the $30, $40 range. A ball python's temperature on the hot side should be somewhere 90s, high 80s. On their cool side, typically you want to keep it around the 80 Humidity needs to be maintained as well, but they don't necessarily need it humid all of the time. They need help shedding, just like any reptile typically would. If you Google ball python humidity, you see 50 to 60%. Sure, I've seen 80% as well. And then when their eggs are concerned, it's pretty much called 100%. I just think that you just need to find something that holds humidity, spray it down and make sure it doesn't get too dry, and don't really overthink it, but don't neglect it. Make sure you're monitoring it. If you can find a gauge that measures your humidity, I would pop it in a few of them every now and again just to see what you're at. Some people might try and crucify me for this, but I don't think you need to really overthink it, because they certainly don't need a swamp to be in. And then your proper equipment, I kind of already touched on this, but you need to make sure that you have a thermostat. Again, you can get a little gauge for the humidity as well. You need a temp gun. These are really cheap. I think I got mine for less than 20 bucks on Amazon a couple years ago. Towels to clean it out. If you want, you can actually check out Redline has a bunch of nifty tools for cleaning now as well. Number 4 would be hunger strikes. Be prepared for hunger strikes. This could be right away when you get them home too, even as a hatchling. They're going to be stressed out, they're going to be scared, they're going to be in a new environment. The best way to break a hunger strike is to make sure that your enclosure is properly set up with proper temperatures, proper hides, proper humidity, and then just leave them be for a while. Make sure you get a lot of knowledge from the breeder that you buy from, and make sure you know what food it's on, and don't be afraid to try some new variety. The biggest thing to remember about a hunger strike is that it's not really a need for panic. With a new hatchling, it is a little bit more of a cause of concern if they have not eaten in a little while, a month-ish or so, and we're talking 100 grams or less. But in an adult, do not worry. I have a snake right now that laid eggs for me. She ate 1 or 2 times after she laid and then stopped. She has not eaten since February. She still has a really good body condition for the most part, and I believe maybe has lost 3 to 5 grams. They don't do anything all day. Think about that. You should be prepared for hunger strikes. They're known for being picky eaters. I've talked about this in another video. I recommend checking that video out for the full version of it. The short of it is make sure you're trying different things. Make sure you're switching up your schedule and keeping it different. Don't always dangle food in front of this snake's face. It's just gonna stress it out, and it's gonna associate food with stress, and that's something you don't want. But be prepared and be a little bit knowledgeable on hunger strikes. At the same time, don't let it freak you out. You need to make sure you have a proper substrate. This can be as simple as paper towel. It's not pretty, but it's effective. You could double layer it if you really want to, but this stuff will hold some water to it. Now you're gonna need to keep an eye on it, but just make sure you have some water on there. Cocoa husk is considered probably one of the better substrates that a lot of people use for ball pythons. It holds humidity wonderfully. It soaks up a lot of water without getting too swampy. The downsides would be gnats, honestly. Gnats can happen, and that's really annoying. But in general, I think cocoa husk is really good. You know, if they try to ingest that, it's organic. It's not going to really mess with them that much. You can do cypress mulch as well. It's really good, and it holds humidity very well as well. The one downside with cypress mulch is that you get actual wood chips in there. I don't know if I'd recommend it for a hatchling. What I want to talk about is aspen for ball pythons. Aspen is not something I personally would use, but my caution there would be that aspen is very dry and you can't soak it without it molding. If you're going to use aspen, you're going to need a humid hide or a humid sanctuary of some sort. This can be done in various different ways. I've seen people use the plastic boxes that you store food in and just cut with a hole in the side or in the top. Just make sure that if you do that, you're careful with the edging on there too. And then they'll put like sphagnum moss in there or a mixture of things and keep that very, very humid. That way it has a retreat to receive their humidity if they need it. You can also do mixtures of certain things. I've seen people take mixtures of like the Eco Earth dirt and cypress mulch and mix it up. And you can get real creative and create the bioactive enclosures. And those are really, really cool. Number 6 would be make sure that you find an exotic pet vet. I think a lot of vets don't really understand exotic animals, and especially not reptiles, but you can find really good vets too, and in emergency situations, you do need to have a vet on hand. Just make sure that you find yourself a local vet or as close as you can get before getting into reptiles, just as an emergency. Maybe you'll never need them, but you do need to know where to go if you do. Number 7 would be cost. Ball pythons are not incredibly expensive, except when they are. Make sure that you're prepared for the cost of all the setup. Make sure that you're financially prepared for an emergency. You are going to need some sort of enclosure for it. You're going to need a heating source. You're going to need a thermostat. I talked about all these equipments, but I didn't talk about the cost. These are not incredibly expensive things, but you should expect for the pet and everything, you're gonna be looking probably in the hundreds. Even if you go completely cheapo, the cost of feeders, depending on how much you have, is something concerned. 8 and 9 are a little bit more minor, but I wanna get my list to 10 for clickbait reasons, so sue me. But number 8 would be just don't be afraid of your snake. Snake bites don't hurt. I got bit by my cat because it wanted to be playful earlier, and it hurt far worse than any ball python bite I've had. And I even had a ball python bite me on accident once, thinking I was food, and that's the only time it really kind of actually hurts. Well, that hurt a little, but when they just quick strike at you, it doesn't hurt. Also, that was the only time I've ever been bitten by an adult. The hatchlings are the ones that bite, because they all got little attitudes, much like the little dog syndrome with the chihuahua always barking at you. They don't understand the world yet. They're small. They don't know how big they're gonna get. They don't know who you are, so they don't know if you're a threat. So they're bitey sometimes. It is laughable when you get bit by these things. They call them ball pythons for a reason. If I've got a ball python right in front of me right now, it's focused on me. Sometimes you wanna do one of these. It looks at your hand. You come around from behind and just literally just pop it on the head. They will just immediately retreat into a ball. It's like a button to turn them off. The other one would kind of factor into that as well. At our number 9 would be their personality. Some people I think that ball pythons are just vanilla. That is so untrue. Every one of my ball pythons has their own weird, goofy personality. I've had ones that are just calm, ones that are skittish and scared. I have ones that have a lot of attitude. One that we call Maleficent is probably my meanest, most attitude-filled snake. She's had an attitude since I've gotten her. She's headbutt me once. She's just a little defensive. The point of the matter is that they've all got their own little personalities and their own little quirks. They're not just some vanilla snake where they're all about the same. And you can factor into that a little bit with handling and positive interaction. Just realize that they're different, just like we're different. And finally, the one that I kind of want to touch on the most, I hear people make their own videos about it, and we have certainly made our own video about it, but it would be prey. That would be what you're feeding them. Prey can be harder to source than a lot of people think. When you think of dogs, you think of, I'm gonna get some dog food, and they're gonna run out of dog food, cat food, stuff like that. But for snakes, it's a little bit more difficult. It can be a little bit different. First of all, you have to find the prey that the snake is eating. Is it on frozen thawed? Can it be transitioned to frozen thawed? There's a whole lot with prey that you can go into, and we have a whole video, as I said, about that. But there's some stuff I didn't touch on in that video, so I want to kind of touch on that here, because this is more about sourcing the prey and making sure that you have it. If you think you can just go to PetSmart and buy a feeder mouse, you're wrong. You can buy a mouse, but it's going to be very expensive. It's going to be a whole fancy mouse, and it's going to be just under 10 bucks maybe. Feeder mice are sometimes $1 or less. Obviously that's gonna be crazy, and and they're not gonna really get away. You're gonna be going in there every single week buying a feeder mouse, and they're eventually gonna say, if they catch on to you, they'll stop you. They don't want to serve live there for whatever reason. They think it's cruel, which is ironic when you consider some of these big box places and what they do to animals. What they're going to offer you is a frozen thawed mouse or rat in a little bag, and these usually are not great looking examples of a frozen thawed even, but it certainly is a source, and I've not heard too many crazy negative things about it, but that's implying that your snake will eat that. So if you live in an area where nobody offers live feeder rodents, you might be in for a bit of a problem or a bit of a drive. You can certainly get them at shows, but then that implies another problem. If your snake is not eating frozen thawed, where are you going to keep the feeders that don't get eaten? That's how I ended up having a bunch of rats. It is going to be crazy expensive if you try to breed a bunch of snakes. So you might want to think about breeding your own. If you're going to feed live, it certainly wouldn't hurt to have maybe one little setup for some rodents, maybe a male and 2 or 3 females, and then let them breed and then use the babies as your own food. But it's important to prepare for this. If you go buy a live mouse or rat, even with just one snake, and I already touched on the fact that they're picky, and you bring this home and they don't eat it, what are you gonna do with it? You can't leave it in there. That goes to my next point. With live, you need to consider the risks. If the snake doesn't want to eat, it's going to try to ignore it. It's going to try to run away. It can't get away though because it's in an enclosure and it's meant to keep it in the enclosure. So if you're not paying attention and you just leave the room, it might start to attack your snake. They certainly have the capability to do a lot of damage. I don't know if we can put images of snakes that have been damaged or killed, but it's gruesome. I personally know this just from other rats attacking each other. It doesn't happen often with rats. It can happen with mice a lot. They'll cannibalize each other, but rats will. I'll come in there and the rat's half gone, and it's disgusting. Like a Mortal Kombat execution. A snake can't stop, you know, they're like this. You don't have arms. Yes, they're mobile and they can do a lot of stuff, but if the rat is powerful, it can jump on the back of the snake, hug it, and just grab it. They've got very nice fingers for that, much like a raccoon, just a little bit smaller, and just start biting through it with their really gigantic teeth. If you've ever been bitten by a rat, I just said how snake bites don't hurt. Rat bites are not laughable. They suck. It's important with live that you pay attention. With that being said, that's neither here nor there. Whatever you pick to feed your animal is your choice, but just make sure that you have a proper source to feed them as well. Thanks for watching. If you're in the area, please check us out at the local show this Saturday and Sunday. If you want to check out our video where we go more in depth with the prey of ball pythons, you can check that out right here.